Hello, folks. I'm Jonathan Christensen with Synthetic Media Processing Laboratory. I'm coming to you from the Big Island of Hawaii, so aloha. I'm out here on Starlink Internet in the middle of nowhere. It's storming like crazy. We may be interrupted by the rain and the wind, but yeah. So how did I get here? Who am I? I've been in the RTC space for about 20 years. I was the first GPM at Microsoft on RTC way back when. Later, spent about 6 years at Skype doing audio and video, among other things. And along the way, I've founded a few companies, Camino Networks, Wire, and today Simple. We call it Simple. But way before me, and way before any of us, almost 200 years ago, there was a wire that was stretched down a railroad track, and it carried a message. And that was the very beginning of telecommunications. And about 40 years later, Bell introduced us to the first of 100 years of extremely expensive and low quality phone calls. And it wasn't until all the way up until 1993 that the World Wide Web and the modern internet was born. And since that time, frankly, we've had an incredible explosion of innovation. We built a platform that includes broadband networks, mobile broadband networks, billions of connected devices, and we do this in this context of relative regulatory freedom for the first time. This is an incredibly regulated space until 1996, and since then, over the last 30 years, it's been a lot of freedom of expression, both technically and from a regulatory perspective. So incredible innovation. Now, innovation is an interesting topic, right? And I really like this quote that I found about innovation because it weaves together a couple of concepts, the concept of creativity, innovation, and implementation. So, and it fits nicely with the thesis that I'm going to introduce in my presentation. So creativity is coming up with new and useful ideas. Useful is an incredibly important word here. Innovation is a successful implementation of those ideas. I love this. It's succinct and it weaves together those concepts. And my thesis that I'd like to introduce is that if you're going to be successful in innovation, you need to introduce some uncommon utility, something that's very uniquely useful to the users, and it needs to be usable as well. So it has to be ready for the masses. And the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to walk through some of my favorite internet moments or RTC moments over the last 30 years, starting with ICQ and ending with Zoom in the modern day. So 30 years of examples, and I'm gonna try to overlay that lens that I just talked about, the two factors of success. So the first one, ICQ. So the name of the company, ICQ, actually comes from the words ICQ. And what did they do? The utility of ICQ wasn't really about messaging, because we had IRC. For a long time, there was IRC, there was email, there was NNTP, there were all these services on the internet, and ICQ came along and they offered something different. I would argue that the thing that really differentiated ICQ, aside from being a centralized service that you could just attach to, was this idea of presence, right? So you got to remember, this is the age of the disconnected dial-up internet. And it was difficult to know when your friends were going to be online. They put a presence indicator in their application, which actually showed when your buddy list members were online. And so you could see and know that you were going to get in touch with them. And this was a novel invention. I'm not sure that they invented it. Maybe they did, but they popularized it. And it was the beginning of instant messaging on the internet. And I would argue, this event's called RTC at Scale. I would argue that they were the first RTC service at scale on the modern internet. And they did it, as I said, in a centralized fashion. And they made it very easy to use. And very soon had tens of millions and eventually upwards of 100 million users on the platform. Incredible success story. Utility and usability came together. At the time, I was at Microsoft, and I was giving a lot of talks at conferences, Voice on the Net, other conferences that were really telecom centered, I would say. And I was telling these guys in the telecom world that the web was really the programming paradigm of the future of all services. And I was also saying, I came up with this thesis that instant messaging could be the blueprint for the revolution in RTC. And I was saying that IM was really the first at-scale service that was truly destroying all notions of distance in the internet and in RTC and communications. You can imagine that these guys didn't want to hear it. The telecom players still felt very, very much in charge, right? So at the time, we were running MSN Messenger. And from a utility perspective, really it was the same as everybody else. Microsoft was always a good fast follower, and that's what we did. But sometimes you have a trick. And we had distribution. We had the biggest application distribution platform on the planet, Windows, right? So we used that and became the biggest IM service on the planet. And, with many more than 100 million users on board, truly RTC at scale. At the time, in 2002, I was working in the Windows team, and I was working on RTC in the Windows networking department. And we decided that we were going to partner with MSN with Messenger to deliver voice on Messenger. And so from a utility perspective, free calls to hundreds of millions of people, the largest RTC network in the world, what could go wrong? Well, there was a problem. We forgot one little thing. We forgot NAT traversal. So if either party in the call was sitting behind a NAT, which was increasingly the case as broadband came online, the call failed. And we argued back and forth between Windows and MSN, who was going to fix it? Whose responsibility is this? Whose budget would it come out of? Yada, yada, yada. And while we were arguing, what came along in 2003 but Skype? And Skype did something very, very interesting. They solved the problem. Sometimes success involves closing only that last 5% of the circle, the problem, the technical problem, right? And they fixed the NAT traversal issue. They did it in a peer-to-peer way. It was extremely novel. It was very low cost for them. But the net was that more than 90% of all the calls that were initiated succeeded. So they introduced the world for the first time to internet telephony that just works. And in fact, that was their motto. That was the tagline on the website when they bought my company in 2006. And I started my 6-year journey. Super fun time for me at Skype, and still have many, many friends. And I'm working today actually at Simple with 2 people who are on that journey with me from the very beginning from Camino Networks. So, things happen over and over again in RTC, and Simple's no different. Okay, so a long time into that journey, maybe 4 years or something like that, we introduced the first version of Skype for the iPhone. Built in California with a team that I sponsored at Skype. It was an incredible journey. It was very difficult, actually, to get a peer-to-peer application onto the iPhone. And, Skype was a very unique kind of application. And, in terms of utility, it was amazing, right? You could take Skype now for the first time mobile on a real smartphone platform. And from a usability perspective, millions of users downloaded it and used it. We found an incredible audience for it. It had the best revenue conversion of any application on the Skype platform. We were at $100 million a year run rate. But there was a little problem here as well. And that is that shoving that peer-to-peer application onto an iPhone and all of the things that it required to run and talking to the network all the time, it woke up the battery and it killed the battery on the iPhone. So the first thing we did was kind of like talked around it. And we hit our head in the sand for a while. Then we started trying to fix it. It was very, very difficult to fix. Our App Store ratings were tanking. Users were leaving. It was really kind of a mess. But in a broader context, what we had done is we left a hole in the marketplace. We left a hole for applications like WhatsApp and Viber to come into the marketplace. And so WhatsApp came into the marketplace as really the first super simple cross-network, any device messaging application, right? And at Skype, we kind of laughed it off a little bit. We said, oh, it only does text, and they don't even do voice. So, we were a little complacent, I would say, about it. But what we missed was that for millennials, text was actually the preferred mode of communication. They kind of rang the bell twice as well. So they did something very, very new, and that is that they abandoned the IM, the instant messaging paradigm of usernames and connection requests, and instead they used the existing contact list on the phone and phone numbers to bootstrap their network effects. RTC is a network effects game, and this trick was absolutely mind-bending to all of us, and really, really accelerated the growth. Years later, when they added voice, they did it in a way that was true to these principles, to utility and usability. They just made it work. It took them a very long time to do it, but when they did it, it just worked. And today, I would argue that the success is in the billions of users who use it every day and the billions of minutes that are served every single day by WhatsApp. I just spent some time in Europe and in Asia, and absolutely everywhere I went, WhatsApp was the default mode of communications for us, between us, the hotel, between us, the driver, going on tours, whatever we were doing, WhatsApp was in play all the time. And I was really, really blown away by the pervasiveness of the application and the success they've had by sticking to those two principles, the utility and the usability. So this brings us all the way up to the most viral thing in 2020, and that, of course, is Zoom. So, a lot of people go, why did Zoom boom? What's the utility? My industry friends say, nothing's new, right? But I kind of take issue with that. I think there must be something new. Some people talk about, okay, it was nicer. It had great marketing, certainly great timing. But I would say that Zoom did something uniquely different than the other players, and this really played to their advantage. And that is, they perfected easy. You go to the Zoom website, and it says join or host. There's no sales agreement. There's no trial period. It's just join or host. Absolutely no friction. This was an innovation, and really worked to their favor, and of course the timing. And it exploded, right? It became the verb of the pandemic. Okay, so if you're working on RTC, if you're in the innovation space, you're spending your time, your money, your career, obviously, on these things, you want to ask yourself, is your project going to offer your users uncommon utility? Will it be uniquely useful? And, at the same time, are normal people, everyday people, going to understand and use it? Are you going to be able to find your audience? So I think that's very critical. If you answer no to those questions, then you should sort of be rethinking. And I can tell you that there have been times in my career when people have questioned the work that we're doing, and I've been absolutely confident that we're on the right track. And I had no idea what they were talking about with their questions, and it came back to bite me. And other times when I held true to the course, and it really worked out for us. So you gotta balance that for sure. A little bit about Simple, Synthetic Media Processing Laboratory. Small company, there are 8 of us, mostly veterans. As I mentioned, a couple of guys that have worked with me before, both at Skype and Camino Networks, and also at Wire. So, all things RTC happen again. We like to say, besides, working together with great people, we like to say that we're innovating. And we're innovating at the intersection of traditional old school signal processing and deep learning. So this is a new way of doing things in signal processing. And we have a couple of motivations. First of all, we believe that the innovations could be more broadly accessible globally. There's a very disproportionate amount of access to RTC innovation in the world. And part of that problem is socioeconomic. Part of that problem is technical, and we're working on the technical parts of that. And we believe that there needs to be improved fidelity, and that fidelity is brought forward by depth and dimension. And artificial intelligence has a big role to play in that, for sure. So if for some examples, if we think about text could be smarter. We use a lot of text. Most of it gets thrown away. A lot of it we can't find again. And, like simple things like what's up with autocorrect? It's always making very, very obvious mistakes for me, right? And these are areas where the application of AI are going to really matter. In audio, I have this one particular pet peeve. We introduced stereo audio internally at Skype like in 2006, 2007. We demoed it to the executives at eBay. Everybody loved it, and we never shipped it, right? I believe that it's absolutely time for dynamic spatial audio in our meetings. If we have 20 people in a meeting, they should all exist within a space that our brains can map out. It's amazing if you have spatial audio and the dog is barking or the wind, like here, is blowing in somebody's living room, you know where that's coming from. You know whose door is slamming. You know where the background noise is coming from because it's mapped to a place where that person exists, right? This is another pet peeve of mine. We've done a lot of innovation in screen sharing, but we're using the same codec. We're using the same way to get the information across the network, and it's lossy, right? And there are times when you want to see exactly what's on the other screen, especially if you're in finance or you're a designer. Why isn't it the case that why is it the case that I cannot see exactly what's on the presenter's screen on my screen? That's a problem that we should absolutely be able to solve. And then finally in VR, the clumsy and expensive headsets are a huge problem from the perspective of usability, right? But let's be blunt. VR needs to have the one case of uncommon utility. It needs to have that one killer application, and that's still missing. So I think that that's a challenge to all of us in the industry to find and to deliver that case of uncommon utility for virtual reality to become the thing that we're all working on. Okay, so with that, it's a new year, 2023. I want to talk a little bit about my predictions for 2023. The first one is that we're going to continue to innovate. And as we innovate, the users are going to win. Faster, cheaper, better, more reliable. There are going to be new stars in this space. They're going to come from, anywhere and everywhere, right? And that's unpredictable. And some of the stars that are in the space today are going to fade, right? 2023 is going to be forever marked as a tipping point year for AI. Recent developments, obviously. So a long time in the making, but all of a sudden something explodes onto the scene. Is this a tipping point year like 1993 and the introduction of the modern internet and the Mosaic browser and the World Wide Web? Let's see. And then finally, I can predict with absolute confidence that the industry is going to deliver in 2023. We're going to have unexpected innovations in real-time communications delivered in 2023. And I hope that I can talk more about that if I'm invited to speak again here next year. So with that, cheers and on to the questions. Thank you.